and welcome to Between the Lessons. I am Susan.
And I'm Kevin.
This is a special episode. We are broadcasting live from Asian Educators Alliance Conference in Los Angeles, California. Shout out to Harvard Westlake for hosting us all. And we have some guests today, and we're going to start with Reanne Young, presenter,
board member, committee member
extraordinaire, and also a mental health expert practitioner.
Wow, definitely not an expert, but a practitioner for sure.
She's an expert, folks. She's an expert. Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into the field, what brought you into the field, and where you are today?
Yeah, so I've been a therapist now, since 97, dare I say. So a few years. I love the question, how did I get into it? I think I've always been the person in high school that folks came to talk to. I think my life, it just in and of itself has lent itself to being one of figuring things out. I grew up in a blended family in Compton, California in the 60s. My mother divorced my father when I was very young and married a black man. And so that is how I got to Compton and just have lived a very full life of moving around a lot, divorced families, that kind of thing. So just trying to figure out how to take care of myself as a young person, but then always asking questions, right? I did the thing where I started to believe the myth of, Asians must become doctors because that's what was told to me. And so in school, I studied to become a genetic engineer. And very quickly realized that was not for me.
Yeah.
And picked up psychology and just have never looked back. I love being a therapist in private practice. I was a counselor at a school for gifted learners for 14 years. Went into leadership as a director of diversity for a few years, and now I'm back at my love as a middle school counselor.
That's great. That's great.
Lots of history there.
You have the energy for it. Like, I could see people just naturally coming to you, not judgmental. You're going to have a good shoulder and person that's going to really listen from the heart. So
Thank you.
I can definitely see that. But we wanted to talk about mental health today. Mm-hmm. There is a lot going on in the world, in our sort of micro world, and certainly in the macro world. And so can you just start off and tell us a little bit about maybe what you're seeing today? Are there any trends that are happening right now?
I mean, from the counseling perspective at school, a lot of what I'm seeing is just more of a rise in anxiety with our kiddos. I'm seeing a lot of undiagnosed sort of kiddos on the spectrum and parents who are afraid of getting assessments done so that they can understand how their kids' brains work. And there's this level of personalization, I think, that happens for parents that if they do find out that their kid needs extra support at school, that they've done something wrong or that there's something wrong. Right. And so it makes it really challenging as a school counselor when we're watching kids have a tough time in class because they're not able to do things necessarily the same way that their peers are doing things or learning or acquiring knowledge, but that they feel it in their body that there's something wrong with them because they're watching kiddos do things faster than them maybe, or that they can access information quicker, right? And so that is really hard.
In the spirit of being at the Asian Educators Alliance, you see some of those observations maybe exacerbated being with an Asian identity.
Yes, absolutely. For example, I have a fifth grade family that I'm working with, and this child is on the autism spectrum. Parents know it. They have testing done, but they refuse to let the child know anything about his diagnosis. And I think there's a way to talk to your kid about the way their brain works. You don't necessarily have to give it a label. But what's challenging is he is doing the classical things that get him in trouble because he doesn't understand how to sort of maintain his body and his brain at the same time when he's in class. So that's a classic example of let's talk to the child. Is your child seeing working with a counselor outside of school? And so that makes it really difficult.
How do you help families or even this child get over the stigma of having a learning need or even needing support, whether it's counseling or medication.
So the medication piece is absolutely no, right? Especially for middle school parents, they virtually won't have that conversation. And I understand it because their brain chemistry changes over time. But I think that the challenge is just having the conversation. And so if I can get them in my office, and I appreciate what you said that it's easy to talk to me.
Yeah.
I think if I can actually get them into my office and just have the conversation, we can break them some of those myths around why it's not a bad thing, why it's actually helpful. Right? And I tend to use medication in that conversation, linking it to something like if you had to take medication for your physical health, like something for diabetes, childhood diabetes is out there, right? They're going to say yes, but my child has this. Would you say no to your child who needed that, right? And so this is where having them go get assessed and done. And if that comes back as your child might benefit from medication that supports their brain, right? Would you say yes to that? And I think when I can get them to that place, the answer is I'll get my child tested. That's the first step. And then the next step is making sure that I have the resources available to them, practitioners that speak not necessarily their cultural language, but just their own language. And part of my job is making sure that I match practitioners with the family, because not all practitioners work the same way. That makes sense, right? Yep. So making sure that my resources are also intact and up to date.
Can I just bring us back to I said, get families into your office to just talk about it.
Yeah.
Why is talking about, like, just even naming it, talking about it, even conversation about it is so important? It just seems to be like that first step.
Yeah.
Why is that so important?
And I think I mentioned it a bit earlier. It gets personalized to the parent. I have done something wrong that my child needs this, whatever this is. And then depending on whether or not they're necessarily first generation here, if they're an immigrant family, their own ideas around what mental health is. So if there's a stigma in their own mindset, then they're not willing to come. I have another family I can give you an example of that. Their daughter is getting ready from our school and has significant roadblocks, particularly around anxiety. And the parent has absolutely avoided any conversation with me. And now that we're at the stage that we are in the year, they have been going to every other teacher to ask them what help they can get. And finally, the student's advisor said, you should go talk to the counselor because she's the one that will have all the answers for you. And so this person came in, and it was an hour and 45 minutes later that she said, okay, I'll give you the list of the practitioners that you'd like me to call and get an appointment. So it's really just taking that time to say it's really not about you. It's about your child's success beyond the school.
Yeah.
And so it takes those conversations to happen, right? But it literally is. And the first half of the meeting was about her saying, what did I do wrong? It's so fascinating.
Yeah,
right?
so and we're all, like, I think human beings, we're all just, because it's part of our survival tendency. It's so, I think, ingrained in our ego. And when you don't have the language for it, when you don't have knowledge about it, when you don't understand how common it is, and you're just in your head and you're thinking in a binary, and if you're a parent and it's so personal, it's like so deeply part of, like, your DNA. And just talk. You feel like something is off. If you feel like you don't have the answer, and your child is not responding in the ways that you want them to, just talking about it can get you, like, to that next step of just ultimately getting you probably what you want.
Right.
But there is such fear and or hesitation with it.
Yeah. And I love that you talked about the binary, because it was something that we were just chatting about a few moments ago. Is counseling, psychotherapy, seeking help means something's wrong, right? And so it's right and wrong thinking that gets us in that place of, well, what if there's nothing wrong and that this is just support? And being able to give them the language and understanding that there isn't anything wrong. It's just that your child's brain works differently. Your child's emotions show up differently, right? And being able to support them that way. The language piece is key, and not the spoken language, but the words that we use to describe what's happening for our child and for ourselves. Those words are really important to have their definitions on.
The majority of our listeners are generally educators or caregivers in some way. What, if any, advice would you give them on how to create support and create a supportive environment for our students, or our children?
Ooh, that's a good question. As a therapist, the first question I would want to ask is, what are you doing to take care of yourself? Like when you need help, would you be willing to go and get help? Ask for help. Go seek the counsel of a therapist. And I will generally sort of gauge how I give my support to that person based on their response. And I know that seems sort of like a little bit of a stretch, but that gives me a sense of whether they have capacity. And so if I get I would never go to therapy. Then my work is really about understanding this person before I try to set them up to support a child who actually needs the support that I'm giving, right? That's really fascinating to me, right? Because if the answer is absolutely not, I never go,
Right.
well, why not? And so in the case that there are folks that are actually actively in therapy, they already know the benefits. They understand the impact and a positive impact. And so it's easy to counsel them. They have some of these intuitive thoughts about how to support their kiddo. And often those are the ones that are coming to me to say, hey, I'm seeing something in this kid. This child wrote something. I know the kid, and I want you to help me understand how to reach them. They don't want me to work with the kid. They want to be able to continue that relationship and help them, right? And so it's those kinds of things to help create those supportive environments, right? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And at home,
What about home?
how would you, like, if you're a parent and noticing some differences in your child's behavior, what are some questions that you could ask as a parent to probe?
Oh my gosh. So it's the same question.
Okay.
When you need help, is it easy for you to ask for help? And depending on the identity of the parent, right? And this isn't a sweeping generalization, but what I do find is in my school, my Asian families find it harder to ask for help. And again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. They personalize the need for their child who needs something. So if they see or hear that their child needs something that is not coming from them, they've done something wrong, right? And so it's really about supporting them and understanding that there isn't anything wrong with them as a parent. And that's a really tricky balance too, is because I never want a parent to think that I'm judging them. And that's hard because the questions that I ask have to be about supporting their parent and growing them as well. When a parent says, these are the things that I'm noticing, I will say, so for my white families, they want to invest as much time, money, and support they can. And I don't know why that is, other than it's the way that it is. I'm not going to make any sweeping generalizations about that, but it's true that some of my white families are really, they don't question. It's, can you give me the last try? And so there is a stigma about asking for help, I think, from some of my Asian families. Yeah. And that's true for some of the other families of color in my school. Right? Fascinating.
A lot of the families that I've talked to in my position, my role as administrator, they often share with me that their children are hesitant or are against going to see a counselor.
Yes.
And they have a lot of trouble convincing or getting their child to a therapist. And often they give up.
Yeah.
And
The kids give up?
No, the parents.
Ah.
They don't want to cross that bridge, or they don't want to upset their child anymore. And just from my observations, when that happens, it's just creating more of a disservice for their child. Have you ever worked with, had experience of working with families or schools like that?
Yeah. So that is probably one of my biggest challenges is when you let the child run the house and let the child make the decisions on whether or not they go to the counselor, and not even the counselor, but go to therapy, right? And I think what makes it easier, at least, and this isn't about bragging. It's also about understanding for me how to reach kids. There are a number of kiddos that absolutely won't see the counselor, right? But if I am not in my office, I'm out in the space and having conversations with different kids who don't necessarily need to see the counselor, but just building relationship and building rapport and meeting them where they are, then it's easier to have a kid say, you know, you should go talk to Miss Reanne because I bet you she can help you answer that question or figure out a solution. And that's actually how I get kiddos in. Is I don't sit in my office waiting for kids to come. I'm actually out there in the space. And I'm also in classrooms when I can be. I'm also talking to teachers. So when kids see me talking to their favorite teacher, and the teacher says, maybe you should go talk to Miss Reanne, that actually helps, right? So it's about being visible in the space.
I think, I think for even adults too, but it's more maybe pronounced with kids, just as long as you're approachable, certainly accessible,
Yes.
but also approachable. And I think if you're out in the spaces, you're connected to people that they find safety with, that I'm sure that makes it much more easier for them to come see you.
I think so.
So I'm a big believer I'm very fortunate. Obviously I grew up in an Asian family. My parents are immigrants. They didn't grow up with mental health support, but my mom was open to it since we were young, since we were teenagers. So I just did not grow up with that stigma. So I'm such a big believer in getting whatever support, you need. And even though I grew up like that, I think I still suffered like for a long time because it's sometimes, there are things that hold us back. And it's, I think if we don't have to be held back, we don't have to be burdened and weighed down, then let's not be. Yeah. And I think seeking out mental, emotional support is like a surefire way to move in that direction.
One of my favorite things, a visual that I help families with or kiddos with, is I have things all over my office, right? And if someone comes in and I'll say, let's just try this exercise. And I'll say, can you pick up that vase and hold that? How about, can you pick up the Kleenex box and hold that? Can you pick up my bag and hold that? Can you pick up your bag and hold that? And I have them pick things up around my office. And then I have them talk about what they have in their hands. And I'm like, well, I don't know. This isn't my stuff. Okay, but you're holding it. And so what are you going to do with it? And they literally are, well, you told me to pick it up. And so it's fascinating to see them sort of working through thinking. And then I say, well, why don't you describe one of the things that you're holding? And so they do that. And I say, so this is an example of actually what going to talk to a counselor is. That you actually don't necessarily know what you're holding on to, but you're holding on to it. And you can also let it go. And just because I said to pick it up doesn't mean you can't put it down. You have agency. You have agency to let it go.
That's brilliant.
It's so...
It's brilliant.
Right? It's really letting them also know that they have the agency, they have choice, and that they can actually then begin to look at, oh, I didn't realize that I was holding on to this thing in my body, or I was holding on to this thought in my head about the thing that I experienced X years ago, or just yesterday, right? And so it's giving them that physical contact with their environment that helps them get a sense of, oh, maybe therapy isn't a bad thing. I didn't realize that this was as easily accessible as possible, right?
Oh, not accessible?
I know. That's another conversation.
Another conversation.
And I guess lastly, as for educators, like we started the broadcast by saying there's a lot going on in the world for our students and our families. The same is so true for our educators as well, along with the ebbs and flows of a normal school year. What, if any, advice would you give educators to how to take care of themselves during this time?
So glad you asked that question. I do feel like the word or the phrase self-care is so overused. But I do think that if you are not taking care of yourself, then you are not available for kiddos or your family, or anybody else, right?
The whole flight attendant analogy of
literally
the
the oxygen mask, for sure. So I would say do the things that bring you joy, And it could be the smallest things, right? Or it could be big gestures that you know that you want to take a trip and you plan for that trip so that you have that thing to look forward to. If it's something small and you like to work out, move your body, seek mental health support, go get counseling, right? Because it's okay to not have all the answers. Talk to your friends. I think I said move your body, but that I think is the number one thing is getting that energy.
Yeah.
Watch a good Korean drama. Watch a good Chinese drama like Pursuit of Jade. Listen to good music like BtL. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Unapologetic space here.
Laugh when you can,
Yeah.
and especially at yourself, right? I think we take ourselves too seriously.
Yeah.
And so those are some things I would say.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course, I hope this was helpful.
This was great.
Super
Really
helpful.
great.
Susan and I have had a number of conversations about supporting each other at school in different ways, and especially mental health. But we always said that we were never the professional clinician
Right.
To speak to that. So thank you for being here today for us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks.